Actually recording.
Thanks, Orlando. Could you make it so that only the hosts have their cameras on? Or do you want everybody to have their cameras on?
It's whatever is most comfortable for you, whatever you want. Doesn't bother. I like to see faces, but that's just my personal preference.
Okay. Excellent. And I'm going to go through and mute all the attendees as well.
Now
you're in charge.
It's all about you today, Anthea.
Oh, no. Okay, so I've admitted, I think there's 12 people currently in the training. Let me go ahead and, okay, I've got you guys in the gallery. I have to call her back. All right, great. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second, third, and fourth modules in the PIO Playbook training series. Today, we're going to be discussing engineering engagement. We'll also be looking at data-driven storytelling, strategy, and messaging. And we'll be looking at empathy and its role in engagement. So for those of you who these topics may be remedial or what have you, feel free to hop off. We'll also have recordings available on YouTube in case you're not able to join us in person today. So having said that, Tasha, Orlando, please take it away.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us again for the next 3 modules of our 10 module training. So we'll be going through module 2, 3, and 4 today. So with me today is Orlando, who you met in the first training. So today we're going to be discussing how to engineer civic engagement, and more specifically, how to create a stakeholder journey map for your agency by taking a deep dive into what your stakeholders go through when they interact with your agency. And the background for this is we find a lot that when we go into doing these trainings, public agencies most of the time have not sat down and looked at what is the stakeholder journey, what journey does your stakeholder have to go through to interact with your agency from the time they call you or they put a message on social media, however they choose to first interact with you. What is the journey that they have to take? And so we're going to talk about how to create a stakeholder journey map for your agency, and then how to identify the pain points or places where there are impediments to working with your agency. Okay, and then just a little bit about the instructors. So there's actually 4 instructors for this. You guys all know me. Courtney Cunningham is going to be talking to you tomorrow about ADA compliance. And then, of course, Orlando. And then we have Myra Roca from Univision, who is going to be talking to you about media training in tomorrow's session as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to go through the stakeholder journey mapping process. And the whole goal of this is for you to be able to design a better experience for your stakeholders when they're working with your agency. So we're going to take a look at how all of the interactions happen when someone decides, hey, I want to find information out from the Broward MPO, or I have a question, or whatever the case may be, or I have a comment on social media. We're going to take a look at where are those bottlenecks, where are those pain points, where are people having difficulty reaching your agency or interacting, and where are they having difficulty becoming an advocate for your agency's brand. Okay, so what is stakeholder journey mapping? So it's basically the process of being able to map out every single step that a stakeholder has to take to be able to interact with your agency. It's really the process of creating a visual representation of what your stakeholders are going through when they have to interact with you. And then this gives you insight into those pain points that we were talking about that keep stakeholders from participating. Okay, so here's a few statistics. We always do a statistical snapshot in most of these trainings. And so the importance of stakeholder journey mapping is really, influential in putting your communications and marketing efforts together for your agency. So Aberdeen Group did a study. They're a leading research organization, and they did a study both in 2018 and 2019 on the benefits of stakeholder journey mapping. And so we found that there are major benefits. So 54% of agencies had a greater return on their marketing investment when they mapped out their stakeholder journey effectively at the beginning of a project or beginning of an initiative. Through stakeholder journey mapping, they got 24% more positive social media mentions, and that boosts the word of mouth and the social influence for the agency. And the study found that 20.7% year-over-year growth happened when stakeholder journey mapping was enacted versus 16.7% without it. Okay, so what are the benefits of stakeholder journey mapping? There are actually several. Most importantly, it gives your agency insight into the experiences that your stakeholders have to go through when they attempt to engage with you. It also allows you to establish a benchmark for your communications efforts. So if you know that, okay, these are the 10 steps that our stakeholders have to go through, and in step 3 and 4, there are major impediments to them finding information or getting information from us. You can look at that visually and say, okay, how can we work on step 2 and 3 to eliminate those impediments? But a lot of times we find with agencies, when we do these trainings, they've never actually sat down to visualize and see it visually step by step on what the stakeholder has to go through. Okay, another benefit is it does help you visualize and document the different stages of the stakeholder journey, and we'll go through the different phases that you should be looking for when you're putting together a stakeholder journey map. And so by documenting that path that stakeholders take when they interact with your agency, you're visualizing whether they decide to sign up for a newsletter, attend an event, whatever it is, what happens when they do those things? What are the results? What are the consequences of doing those things?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add, Tasha, keep in mind that
Sure.
in this day and age, a lot of people want things quickly, fast. They don't have time to go through the process of reading everything. So this also is going to help you how to simplify the process for your actual stakeholders. Because what happens is, where is it that you're actually losing the stakeholders, where is it that they're losing interest? So the overall goal is, this is also going to help you as an agency to come in and understand that what steps do we have? So if we have a 10-step process, do we need to eliminate it and make it 7 steps? Do we need to eliminate it and make it 4 steps? So this is actually going to assist and help you also to make the process, the roadmap, seamless for your actual stakeholders. And it's going to make it easier because our attention span continues to dwindle. Tasha and I were just looking at something on Zoom, and they had, I think 500 steps before you could actually find the answer. And we were like, why don't they just simplify it? And I think that this is one of the good exercise to come in and see how you can simplify that roadmap for your actual stakeholders.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Okay. And then the third benefit is that stakeholder journey mapping really does help you visualize and discover your stakeholders' motivations. So why is a member of the public choosing to interact with the Broward MPO over, let's say, the Florida Department of Transportation or any of these other comparable organizations that are out there? So we need to discover, you as an agency needs to discover, what is your stakeholders' motivation for coming to you? What are their reasons for coming to you and interacting or choosing to interact with you once they find out what your agency is about? Okay, and it does allow you to address those pain points. And so when I say pain point, what that is any step in the stakeholder journey where the stakeholder is going to encounter a problem or an issue. So for example, if going on your website and someone wants to find a document or they want to find some information and it takes a really long time and they're frustrated and they can't find it because your website navigation is cumbersome or not up to date, that's a pain point. And it's a point where you can actually fix what the issue is, and you can fix that step in the process. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And there's all different kinds of pain points in a stakeholder journey. We'll go through some of them and talk about how you can fix those pain points if those things apply to your agency. Okay, so what does a stakeholder journey map actually look like? So there's several types of stakeholder journey maps. This one is an example where it's segmented by stakeholder. So a lot of times what agencies will do is, if you have data on your stakeholders, you can actually categorize your stakeholder journey map by the stakeholder category. So for example, if you know that millennials interact with your agency one way, but elderly people interact with your agency another way, and maybe people from different cultures interact another way, you can compile that information and create stakeholder journey maps segmented out by the different stakeholder and see what journey they take. Because most likely, if it's a different demographic, they may interact with your agency differently, and you want to be able to chart that in your stakeholder journey map. Okay, and this is another one, which is a roadmap. So a roadmap, what this one does is it visually represents the actual road that stakeholders have to travel to interact with your agency. And so this plots it out point by point. Okay, did they come through a radio or TV or outdoor advertisement? Did they come through word of mouth? Did they come through social media? And wherever they enter and start the journey with your agency, you can plot out from there, okay, once they sent us a DM on social media, this is what happens. Or once they sent an email, this is what happens. So this allows you to really get very granular into the steps that you have to take, or the stakeholder has to take, and then allows you to really visualize that and see where the pain points are. And then it also allows you to identify and eliminate redundancies and overlaps in the process. So if you see that, you know, something is happening twice in the journey, or similar actions are happening twice in the journey, you can maybe consolidate those activities and see if you can streamline them so it's easier for your stakeholders to interact with you. Okay, this is another one. This is an infographic type of stakeholder journey map, which just basically takes you through each of the steps. This is just an example from a customer-facing business. And so this takes you through all of the steps and all of the places that the stakeholder can encounter information with this particular type of stakeholder map. Okay, and now we're going to go into some breakout rooms, well, one breakout room. And so we're going to divide you into two breakout rooms. I'm going to go into one and Orlando is going to go into the other. And we're going to talk about the current impressions you have of interacting with your agency. Maybe you already know of pain points. Maybe you already have ideas on where the process can be improved. So is it mostly a seamless process when you try to deal with a Broward MPO? Is there room for improvement? We're going to break out for about 10 minutes to discuss that. And I think we do have a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if we want to address those. Okay, those aren't actually questions. They're actually comments, so that's fine. Okay, so we're going to break out now into our breakout rooms for 10 minutes. So we'll see you in 10.
Things I saved up during college, so once I graduated, I went to Europe for a couple weeks, and going to Paris was always my dream from like being little. So.
All right, so who's going to take charge? Because I'm not taking charge. We go back to the question here. So what are your current impressions of interacting with your agency? Is it mostly a seamless process? Is there room for improvement?
This is James. I'm going to jump in. Yeah, there's room for improvement, but it's good. And I guess we have Carol, Hannah, and Renee. Hannah's probably more familiar with this. So, for example, we have that system of the Broward MPO info email, and I guess for some of us on, maybe not on your side, but some of us on the other staff, those things kind of seem to catch us by surprise. I assume you guys have a process for going through those and reviewing those, but they might catch us by surprise because it's kind of random when people are going to get in touch with us in that regard. I'm mentioning this also because working with Carol, did some interviews for Vision 21 that are going to be on TV tomorrow. And so I'm not sure if Greg did this, but part of my presentation was also say, hey, if you want more information, contact us, go on the website and you can sign up. And so again, I'm hoping that the PIO team has a process for handling those things as they come in.
Yeah, so typically what we do, we check the info box like 2 or 3 times a week, just to monitor it and see what comes in. Typically the emails that we receive are either the automated ones for adding someone to the email list or the mailing list, or it's spam. But maybe like once or twice a month, we'll get inquiries from the public just about projects that are happening, or Complete Streets project, or the Mobility Hub or something like that. And then we try to forward it to whoever the PM is or whoever on the team has the most amount of information.
Okay, so you do have a process. That's good.
Yeah, we do.
Also, I think David checks it like every other day as well. So he is checking that info. If James, you're talking about the info that comes into the, he, I know, checks it quite often.
Yeah.
And
I know, like from Renee's perspective, it seemed kind of like random that we get these requests, but I guess that's just that process.
Actually, I was on the info for a while, and you get everything from someone wanting to know about some particular project to someone trying to sell you something. A lot of sales calls in there.
Yeah.
And does it generate an automatic response when people actually send the email? Do they get a response? Thank you for contacting our office.
That I don't know. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Hi there, this is Erica. I'm hoping you can all hear me. I was having some computer issues earlier. Yeah, so the info is kind of the catch-all, but I can even say that for myself, because I'm, Title VI ADA, because I'm the name that's on the header and footer of everything that goes out. I'm often getting a lot of, the outside of the info stuff. So I'm sort of the other one, I guess, that's in the mix, and doing the same thing that Hannah was saying, which is that if something comes in, if it's a solicitation, obviously we deal with it one way, but usually if it's someone asking about a specific project or who can I reach out to from this municipality, et cetera, it's often just about redirecting them to the person who's most appropriate. But yeah, I think the idea of an automated response is something that we'd probably have to look at doing, but certainly not a bad idea, because I don't believe we have that in place right now.
And to your point, Erica, it would be, let's say, the automatic response. Would it be good to say, hey, listen, if your question is in regards to this department or this, and it would actually put the contact, or is it necessary for you to come in and respond to that person and say, hey, this is who you would need to reach out to? Is there a way to come in and maybe with that automatic response already give people some guidance to where they can actually go ahead and do the follow-up themselves? Just out of curiosity.
I'll be honest with you, I would hesitate in openly providing alternative emails, only because that increases the people who are soliciting, it increases their address book.
Valuable point. And, I agree with you.
Because I think we obviously want to make sure that when questions are valid, they make their way to the correct person, but also, not increasing the Rolodex of people who are looking for business. Now, again, it's not that everything that goes into info I get. I'm just saying because of the fact that I'm the, contact for disability concerns, I'm often getting some of those, hey, I'm trying to reach someone about bike lanes in this city kind of idea. So sometimes that stuff trickles its way into my inbox as well.
And Erica, if I could add, I'm glad you brought up that point about you sometimes get the emails. Something happened recently where Paul Calvarisi got an email. Somebody looked on the website and thought he might be the best contact. That's what started the process of me doing that presentation with the University of Buenos Aires. And we called Carolyn because that happened to tie into some of the other stuff that we were doing. But it just got me thinking. Otherwise, we might not have necessarily let the PIO team know. And I don't want to add another level of bureaucracy to it to say, hey, you get these random contacts, let PIO know. But we do also sometimes get these random outreach that somebody just looks on the website and on the staff page and says, hey, I think this person is the right person. I wonder if we though, and you might already have this in place, but this idea of, hey, we want to make sure that we respond within X amount of time,
Yeah. Well, at the very least, they should get an automatic email that says, thank you for contacting the Broward MPO. It's acknowledging that we received your email and we will be back in touch shortly, or something to the nature that people know that, yes, we've received their email. I mean, I'm sure you've all gone to different websites when you're trying to find something and you get that automatic emails, or making plane reservations. Yes, we've got your email or whatever.
Yeah, at least you know that you got to the right person, right?
Exactly.
So I had an issue come up recently with our general phone number. People in the cities, whoever, have been calling us, and of course, no one's at the office to answer that phone directly, but our mailbox has been full, so they couldn't even leave a message. And it was quite embarrassing because they emailed me and said, your mailbox, your phone mailbox is full. Can you find somebody to answer my question? So,
along with that, Renee, I know Mike was checking the voicemails after Monica left the organization. But there is a difference between checking them online and then actually going to the phone and clearing the message, reservoir there. So that's a good point. Now that we're going to be in the office more regularly, we should be on top of that. But that seems almost like an urgent thing.
Yeah, and I know David cleared the message build up.
Oh, you did? Okay, good.
So, yeah.
Good. Yeah, but for a while, nobody was in the office. So, how recent was this thing, Renee?
it was like maybe 2 weeks ago.
Really? Wow. Hey, Orlando, what's the question again that we're supposed to answer?
I have another. It's like the path. Just a question for me, only because I'm, new to the somewhat, well, now coming up on a year, but I know that if I wanted to find out when meetings were, I would typically go to our calendar, right, on our website, and most of the meetings were listed, but however, some of them were not. And I don't know if it was a timing thing or I'm just wondering. And then I found out, there's another place you can look for meetings. And I didn't realize that. So I don't know if there's some consistency with if somebody just wants to see when the next meeting is, if they're not on the calendar, do we have an alternative location to look for meetings? Or are they always supposed to be on the calendar? I think it was a TAC and CAC at the time that I looked, and maybe it was, again, just a time where I was still new and didn't know where to look.
So everything is supposed to be on the calendar per our sunshine regulations, at least a week or two, if I remember correctly, and the agendas have to be out for sure. That's the other location that you might be thinking of, but everything does have to be on our calendar. Now, if there's other smaller committees that don't have their stuff on their added to the calendar, theoretically we could get in trouble for not doing that, but that's up to each person that's in charge of that committee to make sure that it is on our board agenda, or not on the board agenda, on the calendar, on the website calendar. And that's different from the Outlook calendar, which a lot of people keep forgetting, is because just because it's on your Outlook doesn't mean it's on the website calendar. And that one, I believe we'd have to talk with PIO for making sure that those items are on the calendar, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so real quick, I see that like our time is almost out. But what we try to do is in the beginning of the year, we make sure that all of the board, executive, TAC, CAC, and I think LCB meetings are on the website, the MPO calendar. And then if there's other committee meetings that aren't there, we send out an email requesting that anybody who has meetings or events that are coming up to please email PIO, and we're more than happy to get it on the website. So as much as we try to stay on top of these things, we also do rely on staff to send us.
And Hannah, for the list of projects on the new org chart, there's a list of different meetings that, I know Renee's familiar with it because she formatted it, but there's some additional meetings like the Complete Streets Advisory Committee. And that's kind of on my team also to make sure that they're getting that in there, so.
Correct. That's each meeting manager needs to make sure that that their stuff is on the calendar.
Now, okay. There
Good
we
to
go.
know.
All right. Okay, so I think everybody's back, right? Okay. All right. So I hope you guys had a great conversation in your breakout room talking about what the impressions are of interacting with your agency and what kind of process it is. So now we have a quick poll that we want to go through with you guys, just having a laser focus on the impediments that stakeholders face when they interact with your agency. So the poll is going to pop up here in 1 second. And if you guys can go ahead and take this poll, and then we'll talk about it on the other side after you guys have answered the question.
I have to add some type of music, some of the.
I know, right? Well, everyone needs to concentrate on their answers. So.
Okay, so let's go ahead. We got about everybody.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. All right.
Let's
So
end
let's go ahead.
polling.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and get
Let
the
me,
results.
yeah, and share results.
All right, perfect. So with this exercise, we wanted to take a look at what you guys thought about, some of the major impediments that stakeholders face when they go to interact, when they're thinking about interacting with the agency. And so it's pretty overwhelming that answer D, confusion about what the MPO does and how it benefits the community, is seen as a major impediment, which I completely understand that, and it is. And we'll talk about in later slides what we can do to address that. And I guess the next one was not knowing who to contact to get information. So we can talk about that as well, and some ways that we can work on that also. So thank you guys so much for taking that poll. And we will now go into 6 steps that you can use to create the stakeholder journey map for your agency. So the first thing that you need to do when you are putting together these stakeholder journey maps is get data on your target audiences. So we usually go into these trainings assuming that the public agencies that we're training have not done a deep dive into the demographics of their stakeholders and who their target audiences are. Some have, which is great, and others have done it to a certain degree, but that is really the first step in mapping out the stakeholder journey, is making sure that you can collect data. So where do you get this data from? So here are a couple ways that you can collect data. Your website is, of course, a great tool. If you've got Google Analytics on your website, then you're able to see where people are coming from, their geography, their age, their sometimes their gender, their interests. There's a lot that you can glean from taking a deep dive into the analytics from your website. So that's one really great source of data. Okay, the next step is to take data from social media. So social media is a great way to gather data. The analytics that almost every platform gives you, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they give you a lot of really great analytics into who is coming into your social media feed, what are they clicking on, what are the posts that they're interacting with and engaging with the most. So social media is another great source for you to be able to gather data and using those social media analytics.
And one of the key things is making sure that you use it to your benefit. because we know that working with the small business community, they can collect all the data that they want, but it needs to be extremely intentional for the purpose of what you want to do as an organization to communicate with your stakeholders. So there's a lot of information out there that you can collect. And I'm sure that those of you that are on any social media platform, they're going to come in and they're going to target specific, messaging to you directly. So this is the overall goal. I think that it makes it so much easier right now for organizations to actually understand who's interested in what it is that you have to say, and especially how easy is that stakeholder journey that you've actually created for your stakeholders.
Right. And one of the things that you can do with social media is, like, for example, geo-targeting. So if you are geo-targeting and you want to send messages out specifically to people in Fort Lauderdale or specifically to people in Pembroke Pines, you're able to do that through social media. And then you're able to see, okay, so the majority of people who interact with us on Instagram, they're coming to us through, coming to us from Hollywood, or they're coming to us from wherever in the county, Plantation, wherever it may be. You're able to see that, and you're able to tailor your messaging and your collaterals and all of the information that you're putting out based on either geography, age, whatever the demographics are that you're tracking. These are really good sources for you to be able to get that data to put that demographic together. Okay. And then, of course, making a point, another great source is making a point to speak with and connect with the teams in your agency that have direct contact with stakeholders. So in this case, it would be sitting down with your PIO team, Anthea, Erica, and getting information on what do you talk about when you are talking with these stakeholders? What are they telling you? What are the issues that they're facing? And so this is a talking face to face and making sure that you interact with the customer facing teams or the stakeholder facing teams in your agency is a really great way also to be able to get a direct line into what your stakeholders are thinking. And it's another great data source.
Yeah, one thing that I actually wanted to add, Tasha, when we had the breakout rooms, in group 2, we were talking about the experience of, sending emails and so forth directly to the info at email, and what was the seamless process, because found out that there's a lot of people that may ask specific questions, some people that are actually just trying to sell their services and so forth. But I think that the overall goal is making sure that they understand that, hey, we've heard you. We know and we acknowledge receiving your email. And I think that that's one of the main things. A lot of people just want to be heard and heard, definitely when they send something. And I know, Peter, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I don't mean to steal the show here. It's something else that came to mind.
It's very interactive. Go ahead.
Yeah, something that came to mind for me as you were just talking about this, and from the breakout room, is something that I've been very surprised by is when I reach out by phone to someone, and how quickly you can diffuse a situation by just calling someone and talking them through the process. I found that they tend to be less combative on the phone than they do via email. So maybe there's something to improve upon there, whether it's part of our process that maybe we do reach out by phone. And half the time it takes less time for me just to give someone a call than to write a long email.
Right. And that is one of the techniques that even we use when we're going out and talking to the public. Sometimes in email, we find that people are very guarded and they want to make sure that they say the right things and they're using their words correctly. And a lot of times, if you are communicating with a public agency, that email is subject to a public records request. So we find that people are very guarded when they write emails to public agencies, versus your great point of just picking up the phone and calling someone and saying, hey, what is the issue, and sort of talking it through with them. So while email is a great tool to be able to track responses, track questions that are being asked and how fast things are being responded to, sometimes just picking up the phone really eliminates a lot of the what we call messaging clutter, where in email things may come across one way, but then when you talk to someone on the phone, you realize that actually it's another way, or there's other points that have been added to it from the email that was originally sent. So that human contact of either face-to-face or by phone is a really great tool as well.
And I'll usually follow up with a quick email, couple sentences, just say thanks for the conversation, here's some more information.
Right. That all important recap email. So.
And keep in mind that people just want to know that they matter, that someone heard them. what they wanted to say, and they got it off their chest. And, you know, and not everything is negative. There's probably a lot of people that want to come in and congratulate you and say, hey, listen, excellent job. Thank you so much for doing X, Y, Z. Listen, anytime you call customer service anywhere, they are going to bombard you with a follow-up survey to ask, how did I do? And people appreciate simple things like that. And I think that going back to your point, Peter, sometimes just picking up the phone, because you can read an email, and sometimes people don't know how to express themselves accordingly to an email. And if they write an email like I do, then sometimes my brain functions where I miss words because I say, oh, I should have added this. But overall, you know, it's having a dialogue and a conversation that makes it easier for you to actually create that journey.
Yep, absolutely. And then the last thing on this slide is that you can also gather data by talking directly to stakeholders yourself. So whether that's, you know, having a one-on-one conversation with them, asking them to participate in a survey or a listening session or a forum, whatever it may be that allows you to learn more, that's another great source of data as well. And so the next step in the 6-step process to create a stakeholder journey map is to segment your stakeholders. So once you know who your stakeholders are and you've got the characteristics, you know, basically these are, you know, you can put them into different, what we call content buckets. So based on geography, you know, their demographics, their behavior, common challenges that they face, it's up to you how you want to create the segments for your stakeholders. But it's important that when you are putting the journey map together, and especially if you want to use the format where you're using a map that is segmented by stakeholders, you want to get laser focused on who those stakeholders are so that you can put them into the different buckets. Okay, and then we want to identify the touch points in the stakeholder journey. So what is a touch point? So a touch point is any time that a stakeholder comes into contact with your agency or your brand, whether that's before, during, or after they get something from you, such as a report or an answer to a question. And touch points are really mechanisms where stakeholders use to form a perception about your agency brand. So if it's answering a question, going onto your website, whatever they see when they get there, going onto the website is the touch point, and whatever they see is going to help form the perception that they have about your agency brand. And so touch points include things like sending emails to your agency, attending an event, posting a comment on your agency social media platforms. All of those are touch points where a person gets a chance to get introduced to your brand, gets a chance to connect with your brand, and then from there we plot out what happens when all of that occurs. Okay, and then we want to, step 4 is to analyze the different phases of the journey. So typically in a stakeholder journey mapping exercise, it's going to be divided into 4 phases: discovery, consideration, interaction, and retention. So by analyzing what happens in each of those phases, you can map out the journey pretty easily with what the stakeholder has to go through to reach and interact with your agency. And we'll talk about exactly how to do that in a couple other slides. And then we'll talk about some tools that are already readily available that can produce these maps in minutes for you. So we'll talk about that as well in a later slide. Okay, so let's talk about the different phases. So first is the discovery phase. So in the discovery phase, this is when a stakeholder is first discovering your agency brand. This is when they're trying to understand, hey, can this agency help me with whatever my issue is? What do they have to offer? And they're looking for information about a particular topic, and they want to know if your agency can fill their need by providing whatever information they're seeking. So in this phase, when you're putting together the stakeholder journey map, you want to ask yourself, what are the main reasons a stakeholder would seek out your agency? Where did they hear about you? What actions did they take once they found you? And what are the pain points that these stakeholders are encountering in this discovery process? So when they are just thinking about working with the Broward MPO or asking you a question, what are the impediments? Are there any impediments out there that you think you can fix in the discovery phase of the process?
And this is an excellent phase to also start segmenting the stakeholders for whatever purpose you may have or need, because there may be stakeholders that they just want one question answered. And once that's answered, you know what, that's it. That's what they needed. But there may be other people that may want to go to an event, or they may want to look at the calendar. So this is actually going to assist and help you. What you don't want to do also is just bombard people with so much information just because you have an email. Just because you have a warm email. Right now, I get bombarded all the time from people telling me that they can sell my house. I'm not interested in selling my house because that's not what I wanted to know. So I think that this is where it becomes extremely important for that discovery map to find out what do your stakeholders specifically need from your organization. And it just becomes an easier, seamless process to send out communication that's actually going to assist each and every one of them with the questions that they may have.
And then that's another great point. So in the discovery phase, you can also, by mapping this out, figure out your own processes. So for example, we've been talking a lot about, and in the breakout rooms, a lot about these email addresses that are info and feedback for people to email you to get answers to questions. Okay, so once someone sends an email, what is the process? Do they get an auto email that acknowledges that they've sent you an email? Is there a policy, a written policy that says that all of these emails have to be acknowledged or dealt with within 48 hours of receipt? This, by looking at this in the discovery phase, it allows you to tighten up your processes. So you can say, okay, if most people reach us through these email addresses, then let's talk about how we can improve this process. Let's acknowledge their email. Let's put together written processes for how things are going to be responded to. Let's categorize these emails into different buckets. Are they trying to sell us something? Do they want to get a meeting with us? Is this about a project? And so you can start putting together those content buckets and see where in the discovery phase, where can you make the process better as an agency for stakeholders who are in that discovery phase and trying to find information about your agency. Okay, and then there's the consideration phase. So at this point, they've learned a little bit about your agency, they're motivated to learn more, and they're actually considering interacting with you. So in this phase, you want to ensure that you engage that stakeholder and give them more information in a timely manner. And we find with agencies that we train on these topics, if you have a written policy that says this is how we're going to deal with everything that comes through email or everything that comes through social media, it's really easy to plug that process into your stakeholder journey map, and because that is going to be a part of a process that the stakeholder has to take as well. So it's really a good time in all of these phases to look at your own internal agency processes and how you are responding to the information and the stakeholders that are coming your way. In the consideration phase, you want to ask questions like, what actions did the stakeholders take to make contact with your agency? Is it through email? Is it through a phone call? Did you see them at a public meeting? How are stakeholders coming to you? It's really important to find out how they first find out about your agency, and the consideration phase is a good place to do that. And then how did they behave once they landed on your agency website? What pages did they visit? How long did they stay? And then if they found your agency on social media, did they like, share, or engage with your content? Or did they just come by and then leave and have not engaged with you since? So in the consideration phase, you can figure all of that out and use that information to really hone in and tighten up your stakeholder journey map.
And consider yourself in your own journey. One of the things that we actually talked about on Monday was, how anything that you post online or what you share is visible. So I was sharing with Tasha yesterday that there were a couple of people, that looked at my profile on LinkedIn and said someone from, MPO. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's the consideration phase right there. They're considering, is he likable? Do I want to connect with him on LinkedIn and so forth? And that's just the start of the dialogue. And then we go into the next phase, which was what?
Connecting.
Yeah. Well, in the next phase, what is it? The engagement that someone actually, connected with me, because I think that that's the main thing. You want to make people feel like, you know what, hey, we're going to be part of the conversation. You make them feel welcome, and you will have these same people that you convert, because it's such a seamless journey for them, that they're going to be your biggest advocates, and they're the ones that are going to be singing your praises when it comes to the organization and how you respond and how you communicate with them. And that's what you want, because right now they're getting they're feeling to see what's there, what they're considering, and then you want them to actually engage and be the people that actually speak about the great things that you're doing as an organization.
Absolutely. And then in our third phase, we're in the engagement interaction phase. And so this is where the stakeholders have decided to take an action. They are going to interact with you and engage with your agency. They're going to fill out a survey. They're going to leave a comment under one of your social media posts, whatever it is. They have decided in this phase that they're going to engage with you. So questions that you can ask here as you're putting your stakeholder journey map together is, what made them choose you over anyone else to get this information? Why did they choose you over all of the other options out there? And what was the final push that made them comfortable actually sending you that email or filling out that survey? What was it that brought them into the fold and got them to actually engage with you? And then the last phase of the stakeholder journey mapping process is the retention phase. So in this phase, you want to look at, okay, they've discovered us, they've considered us, they're engaging with us, and now we need to retain them. We need to keep them interested in our content, in our information, anything that we're putting out, and we want them to stick with us as an agency and continue to be advocates for the Broward MPO brand. So in this phase, when you're looking to put together your stakeholder journey map, you can ask questions like, what is prompting these stakeholders to consider to continue engaging with you? And do your agency programs and initiatives give stakeholders ample opportunity to get and stay involved in an issue? So there, you can always get somebody, especially if it's a controversial issue, to have that first engagement. But how do you get them to stay involved in it, in your issue and your cause? And then, are there any pain points? Again, we keep going back to the pain points, because this is one of the most important things that comes out of the stakeholder journey mapping exercise. Finding out where the bottlenecks are so that you can make sure that you fix it so that you can retain these stakeholders and that they continue to advocate for your brand. And then it also allows you in this phase, the retention phase, to figure out how are you going to fix the pain points so that you can keep these stakeholders engaged. So it's really, and you can see the evolution of the different phases. It ends in, how are we going to keep these stakeholders in the fold and keep them engaged? And you can figure out, when you visualize and use some of the tools we're going to talk about in other slides, and you get that journey map together and you see kind of a basic roadmap of what your stakeholders have to go through, then you can sit and identify, okay, these are the issues that they're having and engaging with us. Maybe we're not getting back to people in a timely fashion on email. Maybe we're just getting too many emails and there's only 2 people to answer them. That's a pain point. We need to fix that in the process. So this, going through this exercise and going through the different phases, gives you that line of sight into the overall process and where you can fix issues. Okay. All right. And then we always want people to take the stakeholder journey themselves. So if you don't take, we really feel like if you don't take the journey yourself, you're not going to fully understand what your stakeholders go through. And Orlando alluded to this earlier. So when you're looking at your stakeholder mapping process, either take the journey yourself or place yourself in the steps of a stakeholder who's going to have to take this journey as well. And then when you do it, you take the stakeholder journey yourself and you go through the first 4 steps that we talked about. You can add any new information to the journey map that you find along the way, because maybe if you take it, go ahead and send an email, from another email address, and send it to info or feedback@browardmpo.org and see what happens. Are you going to get a response in a timely manner? What is that response going to be? Is your email even going to be acknowledged? These are things that you can figure out by taking the stakeholder journey for yourself.
Yeah, and one thing I will tell you that as individuals, how do you process information yourselves? Rebecca said earlier, in the chat about, the long videos on TikTok. If the video is too long for me, you know what? You're going to lose my attention span. If I'm watching something on Facebook and a video pops up and it says all of a sudden, hey, there's an ad coming, you know what? I close the video because I don't want to sit down to go through the ads. So going through this process yourself, think about you as an individual. How do you actually retain information and process it? And then go through that journey yourself. And imagine that a lot of people right now, their attention span may be limited. So when I send an email, I love to come in and put in something specific when it comes to bullet points. You know what? Top 5, make a list of the top 5, make a, what do we call those listicles?
Listicles, yes.
Yeah, listicles. So if you come in and do something that you can appreciate as well, I don't have 10, 15 minutes to read something that someone posted. So I think that understanding yourselves as individuals is going to give you a better grasp of how your actual stakeholders process the journey as well.
Yep. All right. And then so the final step of the 6 steps is to optimize and streamline your stakeholder journey map. So now that you know how to put one of these together and you know all of the different phases, you need to optimize that. So, by going through this exercise and putting the map together, you've got the pain points in front of you. You see the journey. You've gotten so much information from just going through the exercises and the different steps on the slides that we talked about. And now you can put all of that information together, analyze it, and create a really good streamlined stakeholder journey map. And then you can present it and say, okay, this is the perfect journey for our stakeholders to go through. And so now we need to work on our internal processes so it matches our optimized stakeholder journey map. And I think there's a question in the chat. Oh, okay. All right. That was you, Orlando. Okay. All right. Okay. And then so if for this module, we're wrapping it up here for this particular module, the key takeaways here, what are 3 ways that you can get started on the stakeholder journey mapping today with your agency? So first, bring people together. So often with a public agency, this means convening a committee. And I know those words probably sound like, oh my gosh, another committee, but I think it's really good. A good way to get started is to bring people together, designate a ringleader or someone who's going to take ownership of the process, make a plan, and set a deadline for when your stakeholder journey map would be completed or when you want to present it to the leadership of your organization. And then get input from real stakeholders. So at the beginning of this process, you're not going to have, you have the data sources we talked about earlier, but what about past surveys? What about revisiting results from past focus groups or comments from past focus groups? And we call this dusting off your old data. A lot of agencies don't realize you actually have a wealth of data from things that you've done in the past already. If you go back 1 to 2 years and look at some of the data that you have an actual really good starting point by just using old data, going through past plans, reports that you've put together in the past. You were able to use that as a basis to get some data because you already have it from things that you've done in the past. And that's a really good starting point. And then the third thing is to select a mapping tool. So usually what we do is we will recommend 3 or 4 tools that are really good. So in our experience, there are 4 of them that really stand out and help you to put your stakeholder journey map together in a very intuitive way. Most of them are just drop and drag dashboards that will help you to put everything together. So there's Freshworks CRM, there's Microsoft Visio, there's Lucid Chart, and Lucid Spark. So all 4 of those work really well. Lucid Chart is very interactive. We use that almost every day when we're putting these things together for other clients. And so I really highly recommend that. It's very intuitive and easy to understand, and I use it myself in the work that we do as an agency. So you have 4 tools to get you started to select a mapping tool. And some of these tools have a free trial or a free 60-day free trial so that you're able to figure out if it's the right tool for you. So we recommend taking those free trials and just putting together a journey map, seeing how you can do it, seeing if you like the tool and kind of feeling it out. So that's really important as well. I would not recommend, trying to sketch this out yourself by hand. You definitely need to do this in some type of software tool that can really put that visual chart together, like the examples we talked about at the beginning of this module. Okay. All right. And so this is the end of that particular module, number 2. And so at this point, we like to get into dialogue and discussion. And so here's some questions that we had as prompt questions for you. Whether you see the benefits of the stakeholder mapping process, do you see value in the process? And were you able to think of any pain points or issues that off the bat that your stakeholders face when they're interacting with you? So at this point, we'll go ahead and take questions and start discussion. So if anybody has any questions related to Module 2, now is the time. No questions.
They're extremely talkative in the breakout room.
I know, right?
You guys can also feel free to utilize the chat
Yes.
or raise your hands if you don't really want to ask the question live on the video. But and if you think of anything after this session concludes, just feel free to throw it in the chat, shoot it to me in an email or anything like that, and we'll try to get an answer for you.
Yeah, and Anthony, I have a question for you. Do you want me to stop the recording for this session and break it up into 3, or do you want me to just keep recording? Whatever's easiest for you with these sessions.
Let's break it up because I'm going to make them individual videos.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
I'll crop it out after Tasha asks for questions.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. All right, and then I'll stop sharing now and put up the 3rd module. Okay, so last call for questions. Anybody? All right. Perfect.
Is there any way we can get a break between modules, Tasha?
Yes, absolutely.